Hello class. Python's math module comes with a square root function. But we're going to write our own. In fact, we're going to write two here today to show you the difference between a void function and a value returning function. We've got two definitions on the screen here at the moment. But consider this. If I were to ask you, what's the square root? You would probably say, of what? You need to know the number for which we need to find the root. That's called the argument that the square root function needs. Or when we're defining the function, it's called the parameter. So in this particular case, take a look at this function definition here. Def void underscore square root num. This is the number that we want to find the square root of. In this definition of the function, and that's what we have here, is the definition of two functions. This is called the parameter. Okay, we need to find the square root of something, and that's the parameter. Now you may know from your math background that the 1/2 power is the same thing as the square root. So we can find the square root by using our exponent operator, 2 asterisks, and 0.5. And we're going to print it out. The void function doesn't return anything. It doesn't have a return statement. It doesn't have the return keyword at all. Now take a look at this next function. We've called it return square root because it is going to return the square root of whatever we pass to it, num. And you can see that it uses the keyword return and has the same expression, num star star 0.5, and that should calculate the square root of num and toss it back to whatever function called it. When a function returns a value, like this one is going to, it will be caught in the function that called it. It's like playing catch. You're throwing a ball back and forth. If you don't catch it, the ball goes over your head. Well, when we call this function in main, as we'll do in a moment, we have to catch that value. Okay, so those are the definitions of the functions. Now let's just look at the rest of this program here. We've got a fully functioning program. We're going to assign 36 to a variable number, and then we're going to use the void square root function here. And here's how we call the function. That's the programming jargon for executing a function, is you call the function. So void square root number, that will call the function. So what does this do? What does this line do in the program? Well, as soon as the Python interpreter sees this, it looks down here to see what to do. And it runs this code that's inside the square root definition down here. Okay, so what it's going to do, the value number is going to become known as num inside this function, and it will calculate the square root and print it out. We'll see that in just a moment when we run this. Now take a look at this line. Here we're going to execute the other function, return square root, again passing it as an argument, the value number, which of course is 36. But this is pointless because although this executes and doesn't cause an error message, we're not using the return value in any way, so it's basically a pointless line of code. When a function returns a value, as this one does down here, we've got to catch it in main or use it in some way for the code to be of any use. So here's a better line. Look at this line. We're going to run the return square root function again. We're going to call it again, but this time when it returns its square root, we're going to catch it by assigning it to a variable called root. Now we're doing something more useful, and now we can print that out. This should print out the square root. Now probably the most sophisticated usage of the return square root function would be to embed it or nest it inside of another function, in this case the print function. The way this executes, as soon as the Python interpreter sees this line here, and notice this time we're using 20, we're using a literal value instead of a variable for the argument. There's the argument. Well, when we run that, the Python interpreter looks down here to see what to do, and it says, oh, num is 20. So I'm going to calculate the square root of 20 and toss that back to main. it gets tossed back to main, and the square root basically takes the place of what you see here and becomes an argument for the print statement. So let's just give this a run and see how it executes. There's the output, very simple output in this particular case. But you'll notice that we got, first of all, we got a 6. Well, that was from calling the void square root function. And then we got another 6. Now we got that 6 from this line. This statement right here and this statement generated no output at all. The only output was generated here. That's where this second 6 came from. And then finally, you can see that we have the square root of 20 is, and as you can see, we're not controlling the decimal places here at all, so we get a significantly large number of decimal places. I hope that helps. Remember, functions can return a value. If they do, you got to catch that return value or use it in some way so that it has a point, it has some usage. But in some cases, you'll want a function that instead of returning a value, it just simply usually prints something out. Well, if that's the case, it's a void function. It doesn't have a return statement. Hope that helps.